You're watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.
Welcome to the Toronto Sports Rush channel, brought to you by the Bet Rivers Network. It is Monday. That means I am joined by Pierre McGuire. Of course, I'm Kyle. Before we get started, please like this video, subscribe to the channel. That's the big one, folks. And leave us a comment because we want to hear your feedback, because I'm sure you're going to have feedback on what we have to say today. Pierre, this Toronto Maple Leafs hockey team, they are a mixed bag. Every now and again, we see a sign of life, but there are still problems.
There are. First of all, transition defense isn't nearly good enough. I'm glad to see that Craig Berube actually acknowledged that and said, we're not picking up on the backside. We're not doing a good enough job through the neutral zone. That's really apparent when you watch the last two games against Buffalo, especially in Buffalo. The backside's wide open. That means that the forwards aren't communicating with the defense. The forwards are cheating offensively to get points rather than to defend. So that's something that definitely, and that's one of those things you can definitely practice. And I guarantee you they will be practicing that. But there's also some good things. And one of the good things I saw was on the Dakota Joshua goal in Buffalo in the 5-3 loss. It's the way they cycle the puck down low. It's Easton Cowan. It's Nicky Roy. Dominating board play, dominating cycle play, making big bodies a presence in the offensive zone. And then you look at the Nick Robertson goal in the 4-3 overtime win. It's Austin Matthews. It's Easton Cowan. There's that guy named Easton Cowan again. Grinding, being hard on the puck, making skillful plays. Those are positive things.
Yes.
If this team can manufacture more like that, Kyle, they're going to be in good shape because they'll have enough bodies to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and Pierre, I have in my notes about that goal where Easton Cowan fed Robertson in front of the net. Kudos to Easton Cowan because he only had a moment to make that decision, and he had to make the perfect pass because Robertson was about to get stick checked by two guys at the same time. He put it right on the tape. That is a great play by a young player, and here we are now pointing out the positives. Let's point out another one. Saturday night in Buffalo, they played a tougher brand of hockey, and it worked to their benefit. Berube said himself, I thought we were a physical, hard forechecking team last year. We have to get back to it. But then he made notes of the fact that they did, in fact, do a little bit of that Saturday night, which we saw, but there were still mistakes.
Yeah, the mistakes are really, and it's really glaring, is that weak side coverage in transition. And so just to put in perspective, try to envision this. It's Buffalo attacking. I'll just use Buffalo as an example because it was the last two opponents attacking the left defensive Toronto, pulling up inside the line, the blue line, and then moving the puck from right to left. And that the right side of Toronto, the left side for Buffalo is wide open. And that's why those guys are coming down Main Street, whether it's Tage Thompson, Alex Tuck. You go watch the tape. There's no presence on the backside. They're going to have to develop that. And that's coachable. That's unbelievably coachable and must drive Berube nuts. Because his 2019 St. Louis team that won the Stanley Cup, Kyle, they were letter perfect when it came to that stuff. Like they couldn't have been better when it came to that stuff.
It's those little types of intangible things. Listen, they're playing 500. They're not that far back. We'll get to some other teams in their division that have set an incredible pace, and unfortunately, they've lost to some of these teams already this year, which could hurt them down the road. But that's not the problem right now. The problem seems to be a lot of these little tiny things that they're not doing right. And I pointed something out to you yesterday, and you agreed. On the goal that was called back, which was inexplicable goaltender interference. You do not need to interfere with the goalie on that one, so the Leafs catch a break there. If you watch that play, after that giveaway in their own end, I believe it was, who gave that puck away? I have it here. The turnover in the end, in their own end. There was three Leafs bunched down very low, going towards their goalie and the puck carrier, and the Buffalo four skaters were immediately spread into a perfect box, all ready to attack. And that stuff has to stop happening because they're all over each other on the ice.
Yeah, they are. The biggest problem right now, though, is that Toronto does a lot of puck watching. They don't do a lot of aerial coverage, and that's got to change. And that's what we were talking about with that transition or weak side coverage, that you can't watch the puck. You got to be aware of your area, and eventually they'll get to that. I think that's important. Let's talk about another positive. John Tavares.
Yeah, $4.99.
You talk about a guy that's been consistent. You don't hear anybody complaining about John Tavares.
He's been great.
Consistent, strong in the puck, key plays, wants the puck at key times, makes a difference at key times. He makes the players around him better. I think there's a reason why they've taken Matthew Nyes away from Austin Matthews and put him with John Tavares. Because Matthew Nyes hasn't been doing anything.
No.
But you go on Tavares' line, all of a sudden you can get stuff done. I think there's a reason why Matias Michelli's starting to show a little bit more offensively. He's playing with John Tavares.
Yeah.
John Tavares is right now the most consistent Toronto Maple Leaf forward that they have. Doesn't mean he's their best guy, but he's their most consistent guy.
Yeah, and going back to the Matthews and the top line, that's been a problem this year, and it doesn't seem to matter what the makeup of that top line is and what that says. I'm not entirely sure. We've been fairly critical of Matthews at times this year. Robertson gave them a little bit of a spark of life, but it's not enough right now. You have to have a top line with one of the best players in the NHL producing more than they have. And if you look, Matthews has had several empty net goals, which are, they fill the stat sheet, but if you go a little deeper on them, they don't quite hit the mark for this team. What's wrong with this top line? Was it because they're being keyed on so much by the opposition? What's going on here?
I think that's part of it. I think another part of it is Matthew Knies has had a very pedestrian start to the year. And so that, if you think back to last year, especially when Austin was hurt, Marner and Knies were really driving that line. And it's not usual that a winger or two wingers in this case really drive a line. But they got away with it last year. And a big part of it was Knies had a career year when it came to goals. And obviously Marner had a huge year with 102 points.
Yeah.
So that's an adjustment for Austin too, with all due respect to everybody else playing with him. I don't think Bobby McMann is a first-line player. I think Bobby McMann is a really good third-line player. I don't think Nick Robertson's a first-line player. I think he's more of a bottom six forward that can produce supplemental offense. So I think they got to figure this out internally. And let's be totally fair here. Willie Nylander's had some problems defensively.
Yes.
But offensively, Willie Nylander's still an amazing game breaker. Not having him around, it hurts this team. It does. It hurts their team.
It really does, because he forces the defense to spread out differently and stuff. He's one of the top scorers in the NHL right now. He has had defensive lapses this year for sure. I believe those are correctable. I wouldn't, it's too early in the season to dwell on something like that. But as you say, not having him in the lineup, although I think they figure he'll be back tomorrow night against Calgary, another Leafs game, which has been moved up in time to accommodate the Toronto Blue Jays, which we can talk about it. They are providing excellent cover for this hockey team right now, but they got exactly 1 week left of that before they shape up. What did you think of Nick Raw being given the assignment to start the 3-on-3 in overtime over some of the other choices the Leafs could have made there? Is that a statement?
Because it's trying to create a presence that Craig Berube wants. He wants hard hockey. He wants guys that do the little things well. He wants guys that really pay attention to every detail. He's rewarding the earlier efforts for Nick Raw, especially when it comes to face-off play and grinding. And that's why I talked about it. I think with Dakota Joshua, Easton Cowan, and Nick Roy, you got a really good, formidable third line. And I'm not trying to put too much pressure on everybody, but sure. I like where Roy's game is right now. I like where Dakota Joshua's game is right now. Easton Cowan, you got to commend the kid.
Yeah.
He didn't pout at all when he was a healthy scratch. He's gone in there. He's not used to being a third-line player. He's used to being a go-to first-line player. But when they get Scott Lawton back, I really believe this. And I know people, Scott Lawton, are you kidding me? Did you watch him in the playoffs last year? Yeah, I know he didn't play well. I get it. But I also know how good a player he can be. And I believe he had an amazing training camp. When he comes back, it changes all the slotting for this team. It does. Whether Lawton's playing in the 3-hole or the 4-hole, whether Roy's playing in the 3-hole or 4-hole, we know where Matthews is going to play. We know where Tavares is going to play. And then you can move Domi around. Because Max needs to get going too. I mean, we talk about Matthew Knies and we talk about Matias Michelli. Max Domi's got to get going too. So there's a bunch of guys. I think when Lawton comes back, it changes all the slotting. It makes his team a little bit better. And I think that's something they're looking forward to. But that's why I think he started Nick Raw in overtime. Yeah. He's saying, this is the standard, and this is the way we're going to play, and you're all going to adhere to it.
I mean, I thought there were so many signs of Berube-style hockey being played on Saturday night. From the one-punch KO. Just after the UFC ended, they continued it. I don't know how much of that was a balance issue, but the whole play itself from the hard check, and then they end up with the power play because of the instigator penalty, right?
Well, first of all, I think you would agree the check was elite by McCabe.
That was elite. It was incredible.
Yeah, on Bowen Byron. That's number one. Number two, McCabe knew that somebody's going to come after him.
Yeah.
He knew. So it's Tuck. And Tuck's a big, strong kid. I've known him a long time. And he wasn't ready for Jake. And Jake, you see I know fighting is fighting. You see, Jake McCabe could have hurt that guy bad.
That's
as soon as
scary,
he got him with the right, he said enough. And he knew he was going to the box.
Commendable. Yeah.
But that's what you want. Like, he's a tough kid that knows how to play. Jake's great. And again, I'm not trying to make excuses for the Leafs. When Tanev's in the lineup, it changes their slotting as well.
Yes.
Right now, Jake doesn't have Tanev. He's playing with Brandon Carlo. Morgan Riley's not playing with Brandon Carlo. He's playing with Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Like, all the slotting for this team is a little bit disjointed right now because of a couple injuries. Maybe Nylander, Lawton, and obviously not having Tanev. Those three injuries change the slotting of this team a lot.
And not having Joseph Wall, of course, too, who's now back with the team's roster, but there's a point at which he can start playing. And that's a big deal, too, because he was the strongest regular season goaltender last year. But maybe we'll come back to him. To the point that you just made, there's all these little things we're pointing out. We're going to hear it in the comments. People go, well, this guy doesn't matter that much, and this guy doesn't matter that much. But I'm trying to put some perspective on all of this. And what I'm seeing with this Leafs team right now is this isn't a forest fire. This is a whole bunch of little fires. And when they put one out, another one pops up. And when they put one up, another one pops up. And then the other old one pops back up when they fix the other one. It's a bunch of smaller problems they're trying to correct. And it's hard to correct 6 at once. But that's exactly what we're seeing.
I love what you just said, Kyle. I really do. I really admire that because, the truth of the regular season in hockey is overcoming adversity. Yes. And it's kind of a line out of the Marine Corps, adapt and overcome. And that's kind of gets you ready for what the playoffs are, because every single playoff series, you're going to have to slay the dragon. The more prepared you are in the regular season to adapt and overcome to all these different scenarios, it makes it easier to do in the playoffs because you actually have practical work experience to do that. I'm not saying it's the perfect scenario because it's not, but I really admire the way some of these guys dug deep, especially on Saturday night. They could have folded the tent. There were times when they could have folded the tent, and they didn't. And I admire that. And, look, do I think Primo's a starting goal in the NHL? I don't. But anytime you get a win with him in goal, especially with the way they had to play in that game, that says a lot about his willingness to compete too.
That's right. He was very solid. I want to walk us through the last week in Toronto Sports Rush, Toronto Maple Leaf coverage, because it's a roller coaster just like the season's been, because you came on here last week with our friend Julie Stewart-Binks, and you guys talked about some things with the Leafs, and one thing that you had said was, if they can just win 3 straight right here, the whole conversation stops. They go out the next night and they get humbled by the New Jersey Devils. You and I went live to discuss that postgame, and we were not kind to them, but we were fair because they were not good. Then they lose to the Buffalo Sabres, something we had predicted during that postgame show, saying, hey, don't sleep on this Buffalo team. They are mega, mega improved year over year right now. But then they end this whole 3-game stretch with this gritty win Saturday night. And if you're going to have a bad stretch, shut down the losing streak quick. Now they've got Calgary coming into town. Things could turn quickly, but if they don't fix these micro problems, things won't turn quickly, will they?
No, they won't. And Calgary, is coming off a 5-1 win against the New York Rangers on Sunday night, and they throttled the Rangers. The Rangers weren't even in the game. I've watched Calgary a lot this week because they've played Montreal and they did some good things in that game too. And I know people are looking at their 1-loss record. It's not particularly good, but that win against the Rangers was really strong. Can't sleep on them. And then it's a quick turnaround. You go into Columbus, and it's a Columbus team that I would tell you, a little bit like Toronto, is underachieving. I think the expectation in Columbus was a lot bigger than what they've had so far, Kyle. I would expect at some point they're going to get better. I also expect at some point Toronto's going to get much better.
Yes.
So we're going to see. But that's a quick turnaround. You nailed this too, by the way. You win those 2 games back to back, that's serious ball going into the weekend. And that's kind of what they need to get to right now.
They do. I want to read another quote from Craig Berube talking about something. And we talked about this right before we went on the air. And listen, Toronto Maple Leafs are 500 right now. They've managed to grab 9 points in 9 games. It's not great, but it's not like they're falling off the pace so badly that a quick 4-game win streak can't put them right up near the top again. But something we said was, and I'll read the quote after, they've lost divisional games, and those start to pile up very quickly, and they matter later in the year. And Berube said it's a tough division. We saw Montreal and the Senators take a step last year. To me, Buffalo's clearly taken a step. Detroit has taken a step, Florida is Florida, and Tampa is Tampa. This is a much tougher division than it was last year, and they can't keep losing divisional games.
This is the toughest division in the National Hockey League by a mile. If you compare it to where the Metro is right now, and you compare it to where the Pacific is right now, it's not even close. No, not even. And I haven't even touched on the Central, because I think the Central is a bit disjointed too. Look where Utah is right now in the Central Division. Look where Winnipeg is right now in the Central Division. Dallas really hasn't had a great start. Minnesota's really struggling right now. Chicago's up and coming, but they're still, that division's a work in progress. My point is the Atlantic is amazingly difficult. And imagine if the Bruins ever got their mojo going, which I don't think will happen this year.
They're in last.
That Atlantic division is crazy.
It's crazy. Montreal, top 4 teams. Montreal, Detroit, Florida, who you expect in Buffalo. You could have realistically expected only Florida would have been in that top 4 going into the season. Now we've got these young, fast, exciting hockey teams dominating the top of this division. Is this a shift in the NHL right now? Did the Leafs go tough when other teams are going? What are we looking at here? Or is it just early?
No, but I think you can't misconstrue regular season success for playoff success.
Yeah, agreed.
Because in the playoffs, the rules change. I know the league doesn't like to hear that, but the rules do change. They do. And smash mouth component hockey matters a lot. Florida's won 2 years in a row because of that, and they've also been to the final the year before that too. If you look at the teams that are winning, and Vegas wasn't exactly a shrinking violet that beat Florida when they won the Stanley Cup. They have a certain identity in terms of how they play the game too. So you look at it, you need to be built the way the Leafs are. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to always be beautiful and a Rembrandt every single night in the regular season, because it's not. Mm-hmm. But this is helping them. I really think the injury situation is helping them significantly, because it's getting guys to become more acclimated to adversity, which is a good thing, not a bad thing. I would just say this. I know Austin Matthews feels pressure. I hope somebody can help him deal with that pressure. Matthew Nyes, I think he feels pressure. Matthew Nyes has not been the same player, and he's got to get back to that. If you're a coach, and I've been through this before with different players, you go to Matthew Nyes in a meeting, you say, what's your strength? Hopefully he says his size. What's your second strength? My speed. What's your third strength? I can force a lot of turnovers. Okay, you're not using this, your speed, you're not using your size, and you're not forcing a lot of turnovers. So those are 3 things we can all fix together. So let's do that now. That's kind of how you have to pursue it with this player, because without him, I don't think Matthews is going to be as good, because Marner's clearly not there. And I know people don't want to hear that. Marner made a big difference on this team.
He made a big difference. He's now part of the number 1 line in the NHL in Las Vegas. You can't take away from him his contribution, but I think it's also quite fair to say that the Leafs have personnel that can step in for that. They just simply have not. Nyes is supposed to be the guy that takes some of the pressure off Austin Matthews in a different way than it was taken off by Marner. Marner was such an elite offensive playmaker and talent. Nyes brings a little bit more rounded of a game, but he's a physical presence which should work better beside Austin Matthews as well. Nylander's doing his part offensively with the defensive lapses, but we knew Nylander was going to do that. John Tavares is the true leader of this hockey team. Nyes, Domi, there's guys who have not stepped up this year. And how long can this continue before this team does get to panic? I don't think it's panic time now, but how much longer?
No, but I remember we talked about it right after the Jersey game, which was a very disappointing game because of the way Jack Hughes ran that game. If you go back and look at the tape of that game, Jack Hughes ran that game with Jesper Bratt. I mean, Leafs were totally in turmoil. They couldn't keep up. And I said it might be time to shake the tree. And if they had lost both games to Buffalo and they went 0 for the week, which it looked like they might have after Friday night, I think we would see some bodies being moved. Now, I don't think that will happen now, because I do think, to your point, which I thought was a really good one, they're little forest fires. So when you have little forest fires, you don't want to have one huge fire too, because then you got a problem. So I think the Calgary game's important, and I think they'll take care of business in that one. Then you go into Columbus, you should be able to deal with that, even though it's a back-to-back. But I would say if they lose these next 2 games, I do think you'll see some proactive movement from management. I do.
I think you have to at that point, because, we can keep saying it's not panic time until it's panic time. So,
I don't think it's panic. I think you just say, you know what? And I've been through this before too, and I know it's a long time ago, but in 1990, we were in Pittsburgh and our team got off to a bad start. And Craig Patrick wasn't panicking, but he says, we got to change some stuff up here. So we moved a bunch of defense. In fact, the defense that we started the season with was a totally different defense at the end of the year. We had 6 guys to start the year. We had 5 of the 6 that were moved out. It was amazing to see. And it ended up being a Stanley Cup year. And then the next year was a Stanley Cup year too. But it just shows you that you've got to read the room well. Yeah. And I think Trey Living understands it, and I think Berube understands where the room is right now.
Well, speaking of the Pittsburgh Penguins, let's take a quick lap around the rest of the Eastern Conference to talk about some of these front-running teams right now playing great hockey, Pittsburgh being one of them, New Jersey, Montreal, the Buffalo Sabres have been pretty good. Like, there's a lot of old faces and new faces on this list right now. What are you seeing from the rest of the Eastern Conference?
Well, let's start with Pittsburgh first. Dan Muse is a first-time head coach in the NHL, and he's surrounded himself with some really good people on his staff, and they've done a magnificent job, Kyle, in terms of creating game plans, energy. They went on a West Coast trip. They went 2-1, and they probably should have gone 3-0 on the trip. They had a tough break in Anaheim in their first game of that trip. They're coming up with big wins, and the biggest thing I see is Evgeny Malkin looks like Evgeny Malkin of 4 years ago.
He's on the points list lead. I love it. I love it.
You know, and he's playing with Justin Brazeau, who's made a big impact, a former Leaf player signed by Kyle Dubas out of North Bay, and then Anthony Mantha. So that line's been really good. Really, it's made a huge difference. And Sidney Crosby's responded to that too. Now they had a major injury the other night. Ricard Raquel's gone for about 2 months, which is pretty significant because he was playing on a line with Crosby and Brian Rust. So we'll see how they deal with that. So Pittsburgh, a work in progress, but way ahead of where most experts had them. Montreal Canadiens are about where I thought they would be. They're fast. They're dynamic. Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki, and Juraj Slafkovsky is one of the best lines in the league. 5-on-5. They're amazing. This Ivan Demidov on the power play, they took Zachary Bolduc off. They put Demidov on. All they do is light you up. Every time you take a penalty, you're doomed against that power play. This kid is a playmaking magician. He's phenomenal. Phenomenal player. I was trying to do a comparable on him with a media person that asked me, and I said, there's some Peter Forsberg in the way he protects the puck down low, and there's some Paul Kariya. So Kariya and Forsberg, 2 totally different players. This guy's got characteristics of both those guys. And I mean, they're both Hall of Famers. I'm not saying Demidov's going there anytime soon because I think he's got a long career, but he's special. Lane Hudson, after signing his contract, has been really good for Montreal. Really, really good. And one of the things they found out, without Caden Gooley, they have Mike Matheson playing as well as he's ever played. He played almost 28 minutes the other night in Vancouver. He doesn't play on the power play. So he can now handle all these big defensive minutes. They're getting goaltending from Dobish, which is phenomenal. He's past Montembeault on the depth chart. Montreal's for real. I love what you said about Buffalo. Lindy Ruff deserves a lot of credit. All the doom and gloomers out there, they were wrong. Buffalo is a much improved team. And now they got Ukko-Pekka Laukkanen back, or Luukkonen, excuse me. He's back. That's going to make a difference for them in goal. Buffalo's going to be a problem. If they stay healthy, Buffalo's going to be a problem.
Yeah, and New Jersey sitting at the top of the conference. The Leafs saw the wrath of them. They're an excellent hockey team. Yeah, Carolina's good again. It's you know what, you back to the Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh this year reminds me of Montreal last year, playing ahead of schedule on this team development, except they still have the old workhorses in town with Crosby and Malkin. But I just love the Malkin story this year, that he's emerged back at the top of the point scoring list. It's just fun. The Eastern Conference is wild. The Leafs division is wild, Pierre. Like, this is a tough one to get out of. And I think as much as anything else, they have to stop losing to teams in their own division. It'll cost them later.
Yeah, you know, I'll give you an example of what you're talking about, because they're not in the division, but they're going to be battling for a wild card. The New York Rangers. I know we're not to the 10-game point for a lot of these teams. The New York Rangers have lost 6 of their last 7 games.
They're terrible. Can't score.
Think about that for 1 second. Yeah. So let's just say this losing streak goes another 4 games and it comes to 10. They lose 10 games in a row. That's 20 points in the standings. How are they going to make that up?
Yeah.
They're not going on a run of, 15-2. That's not happening. Not in this league.
No, it's not.
So, I mean, you start doing it. And the big thing, and I've said this to you before, and I know I've said it on other shows. Usually when the season starts, I focus in on the players and the coaches of all these teams. Not this year, because of the parity that you alluded to before, Kyle, especially in the Atlantic Division and the Eastern Conference. I'm focusing in on ownership groups that are prepared to spend, general managers that are prepared to make moves, and pro scouting staffs that don't make a mess and soil the sheets when they go out and make trades.
Yeah.
If you don't have those three components, an aggressive owner, a smart GM, and a really aggressive and plugged in pro scouting staff, I don't think you have a chance to win the Cup this year. I really don't. I don't believe you do.
New York Rangers problems very simply summed up right here. I'm on NHL's website right now. They are right near the top in goals against average from their goaltending, and they are at the bottom in goal scoring. They can't put the puck in the net, and until they do that, with the great goaltending they receive, they will sit at the bottom of the conference.
I know we talked about it before the season started. I thought the Rangers were a team that had to do a lot of shopping this summer to make their team better. Last year was a bitter disappointment, and I don't think they did enough shopping. I really don't. I know they wanted to trade Keandre Miller, and they got Scott Morrow back. He's in and out of the lineup more times. He's down in Hartford than he is in the NHL. I think, they went out and signed Gavrikov, and I don't know how much they watched Gavrikov. I'm sure they watched him a little bit. He's a nice player, but he's not an elite stopper. He's a competent player who's not an elite stopper. So you go around and look at all, and then you look at Zibanejad's not getting any younger. Panarin needs a contract. He's kind of befuddled. He's not getting any younger. They moved Chris Kreider. The room was disjointed last year, so they thought when they moved Trouba and Kreider and maybe Keandre Miller, they would cleanse the room. I don't think they've done that.
No.
The Rangers are a major disappointment. They have to be.
Well, I got to tell you, Pierre, on a personal level, I know somewhere our producer, Brian Monzo, is watching this right now, listening to this. He's crying because his Rangers are in the toilet. Before we say goodbye, Pierre, you're about to head out on the road. You want to talk about that and tell the audience where you're headed right now?
Yeah, I'm heading over to Europe today. I'm speaking at a IIHF conference on Wednesday and Thursday. George McPhee, the general manager, or the president, I should say, of hockey operations in Vegas is going to be there. It's a gathering of all the professional leagues and teams, their management and ownership groups in Belfast, Ireland, believe it or not. Oh. And that's in recognition of the Belfast Giants and the great job they've done as an organization in that British league. And so everybody from all over Europe's coming in for a 4-day conference. And I'll be speaking Wednesday and Thursday and then flying back on Friday. So I'm really excited about it. I'm going to talk a lot about visions with George in particular of how to build a competing team at the professional level. So I'm really pumped about that.
That sounds really great, Pierre. Thanks for sharing that with us. Folks, Toronto Sports Rush, brought to you by Bet Rivers. This has been another episode of McGuire Monday. We'll see you next week. And if you're looking for more coverage, tune in. Dan and I and CJ Nitkowski are live after every Blue Jays game during this World Series as the Blue Jays continue to provide cover for this underachieving Toronto Maple Leafs team. We'll see you soon, folks. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.